Hello, everyone. My name is Péter Becz. I'm a film director from Budapest, Hungary, and I have the pleasure to have with me Anders Jepsen, the director of A Silent Story, um, which is very unique, very brave, very courageous film, telling the story of Anders himself, the story of a sexual abuse that happened to him when he was a child, um, where the performer of that was also a child. A very, very courageous film where the idea of victim is also shown in a new perspective. Mm, and it's very difficult for me to talk now because I was really, really impacted and touched by this film. Um, and I'm just very, very grateful that we can have you here on us with us and you can share your process with us. It's been a while since such a brave film done in
Thank you.
such a way. So thank you so much again.
Thank you.
I wanted to introduce you shortly. As far as I know, you went to the University of Copenhagen. You did film and media, and then you did the film school, the Danish film school in the documentary line. Um, I don't know if that's correct or if there's anything else you want to share with us about yourself, Anas.
Well, that's correct. I also started training as a journalist, but then I was accepted to film school and I trained to become a documentary director instead. Yeah, at the film school.
In this conversation, what I was thinking is like this is more of a filmmaker talking to another filmmaker. And of course, the question always comes, you had this story with you for your whole life. And even in the film, you shared that the first time you talked about it, it was in your early 20s. And then you started to make this film like 5 or 6 years ago, as you said. And I was just wondering what pushed you there? What made you that this needs to be told now through you
Hmm.
as a director?
Well, I think at least two things, like a personal reason and also a more professional reason. And I feel like the whole film came about because of this, like personally I could gain something from it, I felt. But also I felt it was a story that I hadn't heard before. I didn't hear my own story in a film before. I've heard about sexual abuse, but I never read or saw a film about like it happening between children. So I wanted to make that film because I felt like, okay, we missed this film, right? And I know, of course, it might be out there. I just haven't seen it before. Um, Yeah, and then personally, I felt like I was somewhere in my life. I needed a change. I finished film school and like I was around the age of how old was I? 32 or something when I started to make the film. And I was like, okay, there's a new chapter for me, and I need to be able to I need to talk to Peter, my childhood friend who did the abuse. I need to talk with my father. I need to close down this chapter.
And did you have the expectation that this might just be a private process, or from the very beginning you had a vision that this needs to be a film for the audiences?
Well, I'm actually a quite, I wouldn't say private person, but I wanted to use my own story, and I wanted people to hear Peter's story from the beginning. I thought that was important, right? But actually, I did explore that maybe I could tell this story through other men. So actually, I found five other men who had similar stories like me, and we did this whole workshop, and I got to know their stories. It was very, very touching, and actually also the first time I myself met other men who'd experienced the same as me, where the one who did the sexual abuse was also another child or a young person, right? But at the end of the day, I felt like, no, the most important thing is the process of the one who did the abuse and the one who was abused to meet and try to understand. And for that to happen, I was like, okay, I need to use my own story because I can control that also. And I know what I can do and can't do, and I feel more comfortable also doing that with Peter. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
That answered my question. Thank you so much. I was
What
also
was the
wondering,
question?
I was also wondering if, because that was very touching as well in the end of the film that you thank these men, like you show in the credits that these men shared these stories with you. Um, but why do you think this is such a taboo? Why don't we talk enough about this? What could be the main reason that this is the first time you actually had that conversation with fellow men about this, and also this feeling that this story wasn't told before?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure I'm the right one to answer that, but I can say from my own point of view that it's something that in many, many years was very, very difficult for me to talk about. The first times I had to talk about this, I wasn't able to tell the story. You know what I mean? I couldn't bear the fact that it happened, and I couldn't sort of bear the emotions of it. So I think that's one thing. It's something that affects you as a person quite a lot. And then also when you look at the peers or the family, like my father, who is also in the film, like there's two things in him. Like the one is that he doesn't want to talk about it because he feels I don't want to talk about it. So there's this false sense of looking after each other, right? And also he wasn't he's not a kind of person who has that kind of language, like to begin with, you know? Like he wasn't. But the funny thing was that when I then started talking to him about it, it was actually possible. Like it surprised me quite a lot that I I I I, I had to spend a lot of time doing it and warming up to do it. And it's not part of the film, but we also went fencing and shooting paintball, and we did a lot of things just to sort of be together and sort of regroup as a father and
Mm.
a son. Because as also in the film, you see that I didn't see him much when I was growing up.
Mm.
But then it was actually possible, you know, and it was possible. Yeah.
And I guess you get this question a lot, but was this therapy for you, or do you think that filmmaking can be therapy? Um, because I think it's beautiful about documentary filmmaking, especially if you are subject yourself, that you are creating situations where you can reconnect with someone. You can go on a paintball fight with your dad. You can recreate moments. You can engage with someone actively. But was this almost like a active therapy for you, even with Peter?
I think definitely it was. Before we started filming, me and Peter actually went to therapy together that we didn't film because I wanted to be sure that it was reasonable to do this film and that he was in a place that allowed him to be part of the film. And as you say, yeah, I get this question quite a lot. And I always say that if therapy was the only thing I wanted, it's a lot easier not to make a film because making a film, as you know, is in itself very difficult. So into so if the only reason for doing it, at least for myself, was my own therapy, it wasn't. It was because I wanted to tell this story and I felt like this story missed. That being said, doing the film really helped me with Peter and my father to maintain the problem and allow us to talk about it. You know, the camera had a good influence, bringing a sincereness and like a seriousness. Like you couldn't avoid it, you know? There was something we didn't talk about, and now it's the opposite. Now we look at it. Now it's real. Now you have to look at it. but in a good way. You know what I mean? And also in the film, like with Peter, we staged that we play these old computer games that we played back then. Like creating this whole setting actually helped facilitate us being able to talk about it, I would say. So yeah, the film itself did have a therapeutic influence on me. It really changed a lot doing this film. It wasn't the only reason, and doing a film helped. Yeah.
And you said at the beginning that the form or the language of this film was at the beginning in development phase was totally different. You were thinking of using different perspectives, maybe more of a collage of these experiences of fellow men. But once you know that you want to tell your own story, how did you come up with all these ideas, using studio, video games, recreations? Also, I don't know if archives were important at the beginning or not, but I'm just wondering, like, what was that process for you?
Yeah, as you point out, like there was a lot of ideas to begin with, and the whole process was actually about removing a lot of things, removing the other men and removing a lot of ideas and trying to make it as simple as possible and as raw as possible. And I had this old idea that I wanted to rebuild my childhood friend who did the abuse room. Like this was my initial idea that we should build this room together where it all happened. And wasn't for many reasons it didn't make sense doing that. But what did make sense was going to a studio because I was like, where should we talk about this? Like in a cafe? Like that seems weird. Like at home, that's also a bit weird. Like we tried talking a bit about it in a park, but that was too impersonal. So there was something about the studio room that had like was in a way neutral. Of course, it was also my playing field in a way, and I could invite him there, and I could create a situation that I felt comfortable with. So I did have some control there, even though it turned out I didn't have any, but I felt like I had some control. So that's why I wanted to do it, and then instead of building the whole room, we just played the video games from back then, which is, I think, very representative of the whole process. Like, no, we're not going to build the whole room. We're just going to have this one thing, this video game. That's enough, because that helps us trigger the memories of what happened, and still also because it's double in a way, right? It's fun to play the video games, and we also did have fun as kids. But it's still a representative of, yeah, what happened. So it has this duality in it. It's both very innocent and very traumatizing in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, I mean, this is a question I wanted to ask later, but now that you brought up, I think what is really beautiful in the video game moments is that this is a space for play and fun, and play is the language of connecting with the world for children and for everyone. Like it's the universal language. It's and I also found it very touching because I know many men who are still connecting emotionally through video games. Like I have a lot of friends that are only talking in Discord chats and are only connecting through CSGO, and they just play, and that's their way of approaching things. I think that was very both visually but editing wise, also the way you are using the Commodore 64 and just like highlighting that was, yeah, that was absolute cinema for me. But I think that there's this important element of the archives that make your film very much in the moment. Like I, I think that's why archives are important, but in your case especially because what we're talking about is still there in the present, and then you can show these
Mm.
VHS tapes, these private family moments where you can see the characters, you can see what's happening. How was that process like for you going through all of this and rewatching them from a different perspective?
No, I think that was like the archive really makes sense, because like the film is me as an adult trying to understand what happened to me as a child and reconcile with my childhood friend and my father, right? And as you put it, like the archive then becomes, it makes the past alive. And it was very important for me also to show that, because when you hear the words of sexual abuse, like you might get like very dark images, or it's raining all the time, or you're in a basement or something like that, right? But no, it's like this typical Danish housing area, and the sun is shining. So giving this reality both to an audience but also to me was very important. And something we spent very much time on in editing was how do we talk about it, right? How do we give this a language? And what we ended up doing was focusing on the tangible stuff and telling it more or less in the beginning from the point of view of the child. And then as I grow, like the voiceover in the film sort of follows my journey from being a child to being a teenager and being a young adult. So it sort of shows my thoughts and reflections on the sexual abuse and the trauma I experienced throughout my life. So we always wanted to put the archive and the voiceover in that specific time and not be too clever, and really just be honest and offer my thoughts of how, and yeah, at the times we go into.
And I think what's also an important element of this film for me is these private home moments. Like it's almost like the third leg of the film. Like you have these two big elements, the studio, the video games in the studio, and then the archives, which are for directors are like total control, which is I think also given the subject matter, I think very beautiful that you have a chance to control the narrative of yours. But what makes it very interesting is when you're at home and you have your partner who's almost like a co-director, and she has the camera many times, as I understand, and she's almost like supporting you in this journey, and you can show vulnerability, you can be more again in these tangible, precarious moments emotionally. And you're brave enough to show that in the edit because you could, of course, always choose to edit these things out. How was that process working with your partner in this? And was that part from the beginning that you always have a camera at home and then you just always follow the moments after the encounters with Peter, or was it different?
Well, I think also here, like there's two possible ways to talk about it, right? One was like as a filmmaker, like you're thinking who's seeing this, like both in with what eyes are we experience the characters, right? And with the partner, it's a very loving gaze. So that's good, I feel, right? Like, okay, it's okay to be fragile. It's okay to be down. It's okay to say, like, I don't know what to do right now, right? Um, but who then would be filming the childhood friend, right? Or who would be filming the father? Where if my partner were filming these people, we would maybe become a bit more like of this bully team going around and hitting people who didn't treat me well in the past in the head. And I didn't want that. So we actually used the cinematographer filming the other parts because it felt more neutral and it felt more, okay, it's Anders coming to his father, it's Anders coming to his childhood friend. They're trying to understand something together. So yeah, it was actually a bit confusing to begin with. Like, should I be filmed with my partner by the cinematographer, or who's filming what? But I feel like it turned out in a good way. And I think what I like about the film is also it do offers different perspectives on the abuse, like the perspective of me, the perspective of my father, the perspective of my partner, and showing me in the different relations and how that sort of is affected by a traumatizing past and how we try to deal with trauma.
It's very beautiful, I think, the way you even talk now about trauma, and the term re-traumatizing came to my mind, just in a sense of you as the one who suffered this act are even careful about the one who did the act. Like you even say it in the film, like, am I abusing him now? And you set up all these rules, and you're very respectful of him, and you're creating a lot of rules to protect him as a person, and following almost this ethical guide of filmmaking. But I I think that's where your courageous filmmaking skills are shown, that you could do that. And how was that for you? I'm just wondering, because of course you showed it in the film, but at the same time you are in the film, and then you're a filmmaker, you're an artist. But yeah, how was the process of you? Do you think that was a source of forgiving, or was that in any way kind of like, it's a very, very interesting interaction in that sense. I don't know
Hmm.
if this question makes sense to you, Ernest.
No, I like that kind of question, like talking a bit about um but I don't know where to. Can you ask again, please?
Yeah, of
Just
course,
a
of
bit
course.
more
I think it's just more about this idea of like, you controlling the situation in a way to protect someone that hurt you.
yeah.
Well, how was that on an
Yeah.
emotional side and stuff?
Well, I do feel like I have a responsibility as a filmmaker, right? So me deciding to do it as a film gives me a responsibility. But also as a person, I felt like what I needed from Peter, who was the childhood friend who abused me, were answers, you know? Like I didn't feel like I wanted to hit him or kill him, or you know what I mean? Like I wanted answers. So, okay, how do I get answers? Well, I'm a filmmaker, so I can make a film and I can get answers. But of course, like it was very, very difficult throughout the film. Like, okay, because the film is also very much about showing the difficulties of this conversation and sometimes it seems like the impossibility of having this conversation, right? And one of these things making it impossible also is anger from my side, you know what I mean? And also my rightful anger. And I think what really helped me in the film, because maybe I wasn't in touch too much with this anger in the beginning of the film, but then I think the film also hints at this and shows this, that there is this point in time in the film where I actually confront him about like what's going on, and that really helped me and helped him also actually to know that like this is not okay. Like there is a line, and now we are crossing the line, and it's not supposed to be like that. So actually it was one of the bigger learning experiences of the film also, allowing the anger, yeah, and seeing that's not dangerous.
I mean, for me, that was one of the most important scenes when you confront him in the and the way you do it. Because beforehand, you know that there is this connection of making this film, so you need to respect him to a certain degree within the rules of the filmmaking that you're setting up. When he disappears for 2 years, as I understood, in a sense, and then you are brave enough in that moment to actually confront him, and And you use the word ridiculous strategy, I think. That's how it was
Mm.
translated into English. And that's true. And he even says, I'm an idiot.
Mm.
And I think that's a moment where that I think even can translate to many of the conflicts we have in the world right now, because many problems come from traumas, nation traumas, historic traumas. Many of the decisions we're making right now in the world are coming from that. And for me, that was like this kind of control of your own narrative that you can confront this man, but at the same time teach him what he did wrong. And
Mm.
then you see that change also, I think, in the film, like how this collaboration is happening. And I was wondering about like, of course, you showed the film to Peter, and he has seen the film. Um, and of course, the obvious question is like, what did he say besides of saying that this is approved, or what was his reaction to watching?
Well, I think also part of the agreement I have with Peter is also like he did the film and then his life continues. You know what I mean? So typically I don't talk much about Peter other than what's in the film. Um, Also as a respect to him and what he gave to this process and recognizing how brave he was. You know what I mean? Like he stood he was like I know he uses 2 years not being there and what we talked about the rightful anger and everything, but I also want to recognize like he's more brave than me. You know what I mean? Like and he really like the film is also him trying like he's much more actively than me in the film trying to understand what happened. And he's searching. He's searching all the time, right? And allowing me and allowing an audience to see that. That's something. So yeah, we saw it together and he approved of it. And yeah, we're still in contact. And yeah.
So in a way, the way the film was, I don't know if you can say close a chapter for you, uh, but like definitely heal the wound, I think. Did it heal a wound for him as well, or did it
I think
change him in any way? What do you think?
yeah, I think so. He says also in the film, you know, before it was just this secret that he couldn't comprehend. Now it's open. Now it's something tangible. Now it's something you can talk about. And then you don't have to be ashamed about, you know, you don't have to be afraid about, you know, that feeling of being afraid all the time, it's horrible. And to get rid of the feeling of being afraid of, oh, will I meet him or what will happen or will somebody discover this or that, you know? That feeling is worth a lot. And to me also like getting rid of the feelings of guilt and shame, and it really helped. I feel both me and Peter doing this, but it was not without a cost, and it was very, 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 very difficult to do this journey.
I think a huge part of that is we talked a little bit about this before this interview was for me as a viewer of this film, memories and how memories are flowing between you and how you remember things again with the interactions you have with him in the present, how he remembers things and how he wants to remember things.
Mm.
So I was wondering, what do you think about memory and especially like these old memories, childhood memories, and the way they shape us? What was that working with this in the narrative of the film for you?
Well, I think Like when you experience, like I was 6 when the abuse started, right? And you have no idea what's going on. Like you experience something you don't understand. So the nature of abuse like that to a child is that then you get older and you're like, what the fuck happened? Like you don't know. You remember these things, but you have for good reasons, like you have no clue what it was. So okay, you remember these things, but you don't know what it was. And then the process becomes like, okay, you try to understand this, and you can do that yourself. I did that with my friends and with seeing a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and working with this, right? But then the next thing is that okay, I remember remembering this, but there was another person in the room. Like the only other witness to this was Peter. And I think for me at that point in time, it was important for me to get a confirmation that it really happened, because one of the things that you sort of can go in a loop with is that like, okay, no, it didn't really happen, you know? No, it wasn't really that bad. Maybe I'm not remembering right. You know, I when I was younger in my 20s, I would think this sometimes, even though I could feel that it wasn't true, you know, but to protect yourself. So getting the chance to ask Peter these questions and him actually being in the room and saying yes, it happened, you know, it did happen. It was in itself very, very helpful. And I hope like the film, because I know this is not something everybody is allowed, or it's not something that I even think is something everybody should do. As I said, I talked with some, like we did a whole process about this, right? So I hope also what the film offers is a glimpse into these kind of conversations, you know, and how they sort of, like our conversations are also negotiations of the past. Did this happen? Maybe yes. And the yes actually means no, and the no actually means like but it's okay. And I think for me, it's also like I did what I had to do, and he did what he could do. And that's okay, you know. I don't need to know more. Like it's okay. Like we don't we don't turn every stone, but we do turn enough stones to I feel like okay, I got the answers I needed. So yeah, to share the memories and to get them confirmed was very helpful.
And if you open up that topic or the theme, how do you see this work of yours in this larger conversation when it comes to trauma, sexual abuse, abuse between minors or among minors? Um, what is very important for you that people take away from this journey of yours, that you share this with us? Like, what is something that for the audiences of KineDok as well, like you feel like it's very important to remember or to inspire them for?
Well, I think for people who did experience the same as me, to show that it's actually possible to do something, you know, and it matters. Like, and also for people who has Peter's story, I imagine there's a lot of prejudgment around people as people as Peter as adults, and showing that like even though you did this as a kid, you don't need to be like that as an adult. You know, you can actually regret. Like he has so much shame and regret about what he did. I think that's very important. Like that he also reflects about this. And I think for people who didn't experience this themselves, like to give them a tangible and nuanced and complex insight into sort of sexual abuse in childhood. that's not based on. Sorry, there's somebody building. I don't know if you can hear it.
Yeah, it's just a
Uh,
different.
no, but to give audience also like a more tangible understanding of sexual abuse, and that it's something that happens, and it's not like it's not like a crime story. It's like real life. You know what I mean? Like it's something that affects you very much, but it's something it's not like I'm from Mars, you know. I'm a human being, and the things I experience are relatable for people who also lives lives, and maybe even though they didn't experience sexual abuse. This is what I hope for.
And I think that's also very important about this film for the audiences of KineDok as well. Um, and maybe some people are watching this before they watch your film. Um, but this is a very, I think what's a big achievement of yours is that you open up yourself and this story in a way that anyone can connect to. It's, I don't feel like I'm closed out of this. I'm invited into an experience where I can feel my emotions and I have space to reflect on what's happening in the moment. Um, so yeah, this is a tough subject, but the way you're approaching it makes it digestible, if I can say. I don't know if that's the right word. Um, and I think one of the other aspect of it is for me masculinity and the way you're working with masculinity in this film. The way you're focusing on your father, I think he represents that a lot for me. And you're challenging modern masculinity, or you're showcasing the limits of masculinity or manhood, or how men are reacting to inner emotions or traumas or mm, and I think that's also very inspiring for me, like how to see these conversations are changing. And as I told you before, like I think it's beautiful that you are in the film, you're showing that you are becoming a father at the end of the film. You're opening up that chapter, and you're really hoping not to bring these wounds into your fatherhood. Well, I think that's very beautiful. So I was wondering if you have any thoughts on the process and experiencing this from the inside, but also as a filmmaker, ideas and themes about masculinity. What does it mean to you?
No, I think it's a gift that the film has like these three men trying to understand something and trying to talk about it, right? So I think it does place the film in this, you call it masculinity. Yeah, I like this. How do men approach like difficult topics, right? And how do we as men talk about it? Like I think that is really a part of it, and we all have different strategies and different backgrounds, and like my father is from the countryside, and more like he from a generation also that aren't that used to talk about things, right? And also my childhood friend and I, we live different kind of lives, and yeah, we talk differently about our emotions. So I think the film offers an insight into to this. Um, and yeah, as a man and as a boy, you are also trained by your surroundings to be in a certain way, right? Which which is maybe not supportive of talking about these difficult things that you did experience, right? So breaking, showing different journeys in this, and that it really is possible was also something I like about the film.
And the film had its premiere on Copenhagen Docs, right? And then it was on TV, or was it distributed in any other way?
Yeah, it was like first it was on Copenhagen Docs, and then it was traveling festivals in Europe, and then it was on TV, and it went quite well on TV, and there was I did some media also trying to talk about this, in Danish media and talking about like, okay, this happens between children and child and young people. Like 1/3 of every case of sexual abuse is between like a child and another child, or a child and an older child, right? And so I think we succeeded in talking about this also in a way where Peter was represented in a good way. And sorry, it's freezing a bit, but I think it's okay now. Yeah. And also, I did some conferences and talking about this both in Norway and in Denmark, and also going to festivals around. I got so many, like I got hundreds and hundreds of people finding me on Facebook and writing me that they experienced the same thing. Also going to screenings, meeting people who experienced the same thing, right? And daring them to actually talk about it for the first time. And also like we had like there was this project that was supported in Denmark where people with Peter's kind of story could call anonymously to a phone and talk about these things, right? Because the problem is like from the case of Peter is, and we talk about this briefly in the film, is that they risk of being like judged as pedophiles. But it makes no sense. Like, how can a child be a pedophile, like when he's a child, and a young person when it happens, right? And of course, people with these tendencies exist, but it's not like because you did this as a child, then you're a pedophile. Like that's not how reality is. But if you talk about this openly with a doctor, you might be judged that as that, right? So creating these different kind of ways for people who did these things as children to open up in a safe way to talk about this is so important. So they don't go with silence, you know, because the silence is very, very bad. Um, so yeah, we tried to do as much as we could to broaden out the conversation and use the film also to do some impact. And I think we succeeded some of the way, but of course you can always do more.
And I also think it's wonderful that KineDok can still do that with your film, like bringing it to many audiences. And I
I'm so
was
happy about that.
and I was wondering also, like, if you can share some of these memories of people reaching out to you. Were there some moving moments or some cases where you felt like this long, difficult, challenging journey was worth it because not only you inspired people, but you actually had an impact?
No, I feel like just reading through everything on then people found me on Facebook and wrote me and sharing a bit of their story, and that now they felt now they felt seen, Now they felt like, okay, as I talked about earlier, like this was actually a thing and it's okay it affected me. Was this one man from Ukraine who wrote me that he saw the film and he wanted to talk about it, but he found it difficult because his country was in war, And that was a dilemma I didn't expect. Like, how do you share this? He was like, can I share this with my family, given the situation we're living right now? And also just elderly men, like plus 60, writing me. They never talked about this before. More than 60 years of their life, they never talked about it before. And they were like, okay, like maybe I need to talk about this. Yeah, there was a lot of different. And I do feel what I feel also in the context of KineDok is that like it doesn't matter if it's like Hungary or Denmark or Czech or wherever I go, like it feels like there are a lot of similarities between the European countries and like the way we are talking or not talking about things, right? So I think that was also a very nice experience actually.
How did your father react to the film, by the way? How was that for you, like showing the film to him?
It was a process of him watching it, and I think for him, like the process of the film, realizing that he neglected me in many ways, right? Like that's sort of his journey in the film. Um, and that also continues a bit outside the film, but the outcome is the same as within the film, that he's like, okay, yeah, I can see this. This is so he needed, of course, time to sort of, okay, yeah, it's like this, and that's okay, actually. You know what I mean? So I was actually fine, and it took some time for him to see it. And after that, he's been very supportive of, and think it's very important that the film exists, and that also like other men in his position can look at him and like that's okay, you know, you can be like that and you can have a journey like that. That's fine, you know. Yeah, yeah, that's his reaction.
And now that you're a father yourself, um, and you had this journey with your film, mm, how are you in that role, being a dad and supporting your child? Um, is there anything you can share with fellow fathers out there?
No, I feel like for my case, like I it's fun to have a child, and I'm happy that I started this, or I looked at these things from my own past when having a child. Like I think that was important. And as my child grows, of course, I will experience then a child in different ages that I also had earlier, right? Um, yeah, and of course, it's much more when you do something yourself, you also do good and bad things, and that's life. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know. It's I'm just happy I did this before I had my child. And yeah.
We also talked a bit about, and we are reaching the end of this, but I of course want to ask you about your new project and what you're working on. But before we do that, I was wondering if you can share your experience with, like, because you're so, even in this interview, you're so open, and I appreciate that so much. But we talked a bit about this idea of private and personal. And I was just wondering if you have any advice for filmmakers out there, like when they are tackling some kind of personal story. Uh, what is the big difference between the two for you, and what do you think in regards of your own work?
Hmm. Well, I think it's about having, like, my producer was a very, very good collaborator. And also I myself was seeing a psychiatrist while doing the film. So it's about putting yourself in a safe space when doing these kind of things, like so you don't break your neck, because it is difficult and it will become difficult. So you need to have like people around you that sees you and helps you. And I think also like doing a film, of course, you need to figure out what's relevant for the story and what's not relevant for the story. Like that's with any other film, right? So, and then deciding, okay, do I want to do this or don't I want to do this? Like, okay, I want to do this. Okay, so I feel like, okay, I talk about these things, but there's a gate around that. I talk openly about this, but if I don't talk about that, you know, there's a lot of things in the film I don't talk about. Uh, so I made a decision that I feel comfortable. I think it's important to talk openly about this, but it has nothing to do with other things, for instance. You know what I mean? And talking about like uh, the personal and the private, like I think it was film school, like our main teacher talked about like that the personal is something that you can talk about. It's something that everybody can relate to in a way, right? Whereas the private, it's a mess. It's something you still don't even know yourself, right? And you can talk about it with your friends, but you're like, I don't know what this is. It's still not understood. Whereas the personal, it's something else. It's and maybe to me, like I talk about like, and they can change. They can go from the private into the personal, and maybe that transformation is in the act of telling it. Maybe the things I talk about are actually private, but I'm making them personal. Maybe that's even better. You know what I mean? Like maybe these things were to begin with private, but in the transformation of the narrative, I'm actually putting it in the light and actually allowing it to be part of the shared experience.
Mm. And is the new film you're making private as well,
No, it's
or are you
unrelated.
working on
Like
that?
I'm making I'm working on two projects right now that's still early, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but I'm doing two documentary films that's about something completely different. But I feel like I want to make more films within this subject matter, but I
Mm.
just wanted to do something a bit differently for now. And then I will do more because I think it's important to tell stories from this field. Yesterday I was watching the film Sorry Baby, which is in Danish cinemas now. Like, okay, this is this young woman talking about the consequences of being raped and how you deal with that. Like, okay, that was interesting to see. Like, I think it's important to talk about these things again in a different way.
Um, and I think that conversation will continue in the KineDok screenings. Um, I think it's one of like your film is really one of those where this private special screenings that KineDok can provide all around Europe um, can really help people to talk about this. And again, I would like to thank you for your openness on us and your bravery in making this film and for sharing your story, but also like sharing a bit behind the process as well. And I can't wait to see your new films. Mm, yeah, and I'm just really thankful. So thank you so much for this conversation. So I don't know if you have anything that's inside that you wanna still share, anything that we talked about in this 1 hour that you feel like we didn't touch, anything important you wanna get out to the audiences.
No, I feel like um, I feel we touched about on the things. So I just want to say thank you for showing the film and using the film and trying to reach people and starting conversations. I'm just very thankful, grateful for you doing that. So thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, then I think this is the end of this. Thank you so much for watching this interview with Anders regarding his film A Silent Story. And hope to see you on KineDok screenings. And yeah, thank you very much. And thanks again, Anis. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.